I hereby open this public meeting of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the Dutch Parliament. And I want to welcome Mr. Wangchen, filmmaker and journalist from Tibet, and a former prisoner of conscience. I also welcome Mr. Tetong. He is the Executive Director, International Campaign for Tibet. Mrs. Krista Meindersma, also from the International Campaign for Tibet, and Mr. Loden Ribi, who is a translator. Mrs. Meindersma and Mr. Ribi join us via the video communication. Now, to start here, I would like to introduce the members of the Parliament who are here present today. On my right side is Mr. Ruben Brekelmans. He represents the Liberal Party. And there at the other end is Mr. Sjoerd Sjoerdsma, the representative of the Democratic Party. My name is Raymnond de Roon and I represent Party for Freedom. My two colleagues represent parties who are in the government coalition, and I represent party who is in the opposition. And I would like to give now to Mr. Wangchen the floor for a short introduction. And after that, I will invite my colleagues to pose any questions or make a statement. The floor is to Mr. Wangchen. Please use the button.
네, 자시딜라. 토mer 아니 넘버 3 보통 라 동남지와다 아니 다나정가는 두초당니 아니 디니 년신나의 국회 나와라 대치셔이.
First of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak here, and I'm very glad to be with you here today.
당가랑나 유루 주지니 아니 답보통 랭귀지 누구 요리 토mer 데이터 파렌스네 인도시 다다린데라 홀랜다 레바리 당가때 용구역이 준생가스나 보능나다 니마르지라 단적당자 적치르지르게다 강에 몸부지 키니 인도시 용구역 기소 더 특별히 보는 게 지금 강에디 루아미 도당당 지금 마저라간다 대주 더 매와지 이거는 강에 남은 지게 오거니 더 머리 잠이 동거 요바게 네당 지게 올라 인도시 용바인 다나진다.
Yeah, I came from France here to the Netherlands, and I'm on a European tour. The reason for me coming to Europe is to talk about the situation inside Tibet. It's about human rights violation, it's about the violation of other freedoms, but above all, there's the danger of cultural genocide.
다나진다 혼돈지용라고이나 대주지 용적이 토네 아니 지 춘체되는 고트가기지 리아지고요.
And my hope is that there is a official position by the parliament, by the government of the Netherlands on these issues.
다나진게 다자는게 니르톤스타니가 올림픽 때 자나라 초고요리 다나자 홀렌나나 다지무진이 된데 몸부치 티강라 년슈지고 요사리 아니 디줄라지 용제공이다지 특심하기다지 순주지구야지 개침부리 생고요.
And the second point I want to mention here is, I think I heard that there are also athletes going from Netherlands to the Olympic Games in 2022, and I think it's important that the government and in the Netherlands take precautions, you see, to prepare these athletes for this situation.
아니 그런 속에 인적당 아니 그런 속 배죠 로가던 거 맞아야 돼. 다 정제군이 아니 참말라 ganku리와리 셔이.
I think the government has a responsibility for the security of these athletes, but also not to let them misuse for other intentions.
다 니르톤지게 제문디 다 자나라 도시다 어제 제초전전 속 제발이 티티디 삼바 단 자랑 장징이 때라 동난지 종발이 때 산소제니 종발이 ngugu 종니 종요리 다가나제 보너나 담이 다 지금 사용 공부라 지금 살마치바던 아니 동행치라는 게 처벌이.
There was some controversy when these games were given to China, these games 2022, all around the world, but also in Tibet, where millions of people feel very much concerned about this decision.
당 아주 산발라 다 지문디 시디 당 라닌 다 저가 요사치니 초요리 생요리 다 խ버도 자나 정다위다 아주 보티 강주치니 다 루몽부치 누구요리 당 아주 머레 순바리 머레 순기 정란 루미 토등기 당대 두르두르 누구요 마다 야지 차와니 주요 말이 다 խ버도 제츠 오체 렌속이 가리 체적지요스나 설고 저가 요바 마조 저가 요바 디 크론소기 체적지요리 아주 오체 렌소라 자차자게 제츠 오체 렌소라 자차자게 이치치니 아니 보노라단 니츠 몽부치 미자클라네 젠드치니 다 로니 크르만 유상하지 마치즈요리.
It was our hope in 2008, for example, that when that these games should take place in an environment of peace and freedom. But the reality is, back then, there were given many assurances that there's some level of freedom to express oneself. I myself undertook a project, made a film about the situation inside Tibet, in the hope that these promises were real.
다나징다 지송치디 삼바이지 공기 측진나 된데 멤버지 사자가 치고나 하마고 아니 너저 체매바당 로트글라 정주지 로트즈글 넘을라 투태요 말.
The consequence was that I was sentenced to 6 years in prison. I spent 6 years in prison in labor camps, and then additional time, and I was forbidden to see my family for more than 10 years in total. It was a very, very difficult time, yeah.
다나징 다 보사 용니 오늘 제저 올림픽에 노트지샤스니 가족이다 보사 용니 수이 gembo치와리 다 미몽부 세와리 미몽부 라와리 미몽부 단단이나 종하는 요리 다 개토텔라 어쩐된 손라고나 크로즈기 지문디 천텐지나 지축축지요리 크로즈게 야나 중게 오늘 젠데라 killen지요리 크로즈 killen텔라 크로즈 독즈 당와마테 단한다 올림픽이 단자라이 크로즈 독즈 당요 다이나요 딘데 동도 정바이나 크로즈 디주 남메나 당네 야나니 초와리.
I would like to remind that in 2008 there were huge protests in Tibet, protests also against Olympic Games, and people's opinion was that there's no freedom in Tibet, and the circumstances are not like to have these games in China. Due to this protest, many of these people were put in prison. Some of them are still in prison. So it would be actually a prerogative by the IOC to say, under such circumstances, we do not want to have the Olympic Games in China.
탄탄 스그네게 어쨌든 양쪽 자나라 제발 자나 제티 삼아 다는 지금이 몸보치 센터 정발이 지금 전조진이 몸보치요리 지금 응고진이 몸보치요리 다는 다 정도 정대만 배기 축바 몸보치기 다 지저 전전 소라년 시집표요 년시간라 크론소 랭카리 제르나 다 제스도 지문이가 지지마당지 크론소 렌티 제월 운이기 제스당 제스기 칼라키니 밀라 정도 신캔디 자나정 축고요리 말하나 딱 그만 유상하게 본인지지가 대나 같이 정도게 니몬다 말이 크론즈 제체 올림픽이 다 등차티 벨로 비초 당니 비초 로가 당니 미 몽보치라 되게 정론지 안 주선지와 되게 고 비초 로가 던 거요 바디 딱 아주 참하게 신고요.
Then in the process for the 2022 Games, there were many concerns raised against the Olympic Games in China. There were letters going to the IOC and so on. And the answer of the IOC was, don't mix politics with sports. Yet now in my case, I made a 25 minutes film about the situation in Tibet. And it was the Chinese government that actually mixed politics with sports. They accused me of many crimes and reached to this sentence.
ngaros 지무텔라 지무라 자니 ng고치고메 ngaros 지무 축사데 운이게 지금 잠불런 디근에 시디요산 라니요사 저요사 치니 초구에디 하정 개침부리 단 잠불런 게 정치 몸보치 년정치니 저조산이 지무치니 가가 주주치 수수지 개치고리 반은 손에 가서 미 몽부 찍라다 수수기 지속 성주지 마토 인천매는 단적지야 눈도 조성이 저거매봐 다 나진 지무띠거나 연수지 마쳐 마세 다 나진 지무띠 찌니 맞을때 그런 소 단적도 신앙왕 저거네 되고 단다 동다 가리 정바이나 가리 정고요나 수치기 시마토하게 니탄치.
So we are not, and I am not against the games or the Olympic Games in general. I would like to and love to see games where people gather in freedom together and have enjoy being among the young, together with other young people. But the reality now is, on one side we have the games, on the other side we have people like in Tibet who suffer daily huge abuses.
단 일동일산이게 어젠된 소때 단 가랑선의 할리게 침부지 통고요. 다 난쟁갱이 머르 시저바지게 내던 다랑 시고메. 디 장랑 시디던 저요바 로미지기 김반단 저요바지라 민지고요.
So now when I speak today, I of course speak here as a Tibetan, but it's not only about Tibet. It's about values in general, and I think the Olympic Games actually represent some wonderful values and goals.
자나중기 따단다버던 로미 도당 도즈간다시던 거는 땅에 몽부시고 그 말이 아주 참하게 신고요리. 딘데 인디 삼바 아니 아주 그런 속에 자나중기 딴 노트징 스지디 통기 일동일산이게 고 아는 올림픽 때 초와이나 또 자나중기 단다버던 햄바시 좀 죽게시 좀 로미 도당나 다즈동주 또 용수 접방 가서 하는 자나중기 때 릭샤지 자초시바당 하는 라우지 치고요리.
We all know the situation in China, and it comes close to being a complicit to the policies of the Chinese government when we just participate in the games, knowing that there are horrible things happening in China.
딘데 이디 삼바 다 아주 가티낭에 먹고 드시고 제케 수수게 제 공기 아니 지 지무 진이 되주기 지 도당리 되주게 딘저리 다 나제 지치 어쩐 렌솔라 크롱주게 노트 침부지 니또 젤레지타 단다이나 메트도 조당 소진바 데라 땅 아주 투몽게 크롱줄라 딩갱 크르구야게 달렌 사우지 가서 당구야 되다 계속에 빌링게 지리상고요.
So I would like to conclude with my appeal that I spread everywhere, and this is first of all take responsibility for the athletes. You see, your own athletes who are sent in a situation which is very, very disturbing.
지무진이 때서네 판에 루야게 구수고 다데 어쩐된 소치고라 광수는 그냥 구야기다 다른 사우치 당국인도 제가 참하게 통.
And the second thing is we need to have a clear message, send a clear message to the responsible people of the IC to have a different approach to this. Yeah, that's how we do.
다가 난신게 니때 지무치라서 하는 인지 지고메. 된 루아미게 지솔한 저요 바치랑 인지 지고. 근데 선상 아니 아주 참하게 뛰거나 지 느슈요 제때 땅에 크롱줄라 다른 사우치 디주기 딘저다 아니 배절가 마용바 디줄라 그냥 크로 고야게 다른 사우치 동구야 띵에 다 림보주디.
Yes, and finally let me repeat, it's not about games, it's not only about sport. It's a matter of survival for many people who are there. So let us have a clear message to the people who are in charge.
Thank you very much for this opening statement. And I would now like to give the floor to my colleagues to ask questions. Mr. Brekelmans.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank you for visiting our parliament and for taking this opportunity to have this conversation with us. China is a topic or a country that is debated a lot in this parliament. And there are many difficult issues that we are facing with China. And I think it's very important that you share your experience and your views with us, so that we can also keep discussing the issue of Tibet, both with our minister, but also among ourselves in Parliament. The first question that I would like to ask is, of course, the situation in Tibet has been a contentious issue for a very long time. And I would like to ask if over the last maybe 5 to 10 years, whether repression has become stronger and the situation has been deteriorating, or whether this is part of a much longer trend, and whether it's kind of the same situation as it was before.
Ta 보는 자처때 생일인데 비단 자처치리 니또 제게 질라다 보사 유용라 단처치니 다 잔나 나선칭 스지데 베초다니 메자다 ngachu가 추게 전에 미었던 말이 다 디즈니나 잔는 게고 지 리셰 로야자가 아니 되게 그 전에 미었던 말 찍고 많이 몸부지 되게 제조나 미 몸부지 종죽지요 단단히나 운이기 지 보디다 종항난 생게 니탄치게 오네 단 고니시와난 생고 제즈된 비거니 머르사메 수고요.
The situation in Tibet in the recent past has deteriorated immensely. Since 2008, there were, after these protests, there were like 156 self-immolations, and it shows the desperation of the Tibetan people. And Tibet today has become a big prison where people are not free to express themselves. Yeah, so it's a very, very dramatic situation.
One follow-up question I would like to ask is that in your introduction you said a lot about the Olympic Games, and I'm sure that my colleague Mr. Sjoerdsma is going to ask you more about it because he has raised this issue quite often. I would like to ask what other ways or I would like to ask what other instruments or levers that we can use in order to encourage or pressure China to improve the situation in Tibet, apart from the Olympic Games, but what are other things that we, from the European Union or maybe even individual countries, can do?
다 올림픽 그때 다고 너와 친구지 월이 더 보는 게 쓰지 뭐지 구슬들지야 대도 칼라키님이 지금 zon지야 된데 뭐지란 거 요장 단단하게 개 친구지 더 난신기다 주로적이 지태다 뭐지 월이 더 그러나 보통 게 꼴때 지금 농농지야 전주 당야 아니 더 난신지 존재기 거니 농농지야 더 대도 상만 가지고 개 친구지 거요리 다 보통 찍고 많이 봐. 지금 마주기 가르치고 수기나야 지금 루아미기 지금 도당다 되고 수지 케기 자천 되고 스타전에 자나정라 땡키 맞이와 돼. 다 하정은 안 같이 뭐지 지금 자나정라 다 몸부지게 자나정라 뜬니 지금 마주기 단 루아미 도당다 되고 정말 너무나고 동기도. 되고 지금 수기
Now the Olympics yes are issue which is standing in front of us, and I think it's important to address this issue forcefully since it has real life consequences at the moment in Tibet. People are put under pressure not to, put under pressure. Just now, there are some other things that I would like to mention, and first of all, I think it's important to have a position on policy level. I think it's important that also the Parliament takes a position and talks about Tibet and make declaration. The second thing is on government level. The Dutch government should speak openly about the situation in Tibet and raise the issue of Tibet again and again towards China. I think that is very important. What I have learned and understood is that due to many issues and interests, sometimes governments fail to have a clear language when they talk to China. And I think this is the root cause of many, many problems.
Mr. Sjoerdsma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Wangchen, for taking the time and the opportunity to talk to us here in Parliament. It is really much appreciated. As is, of course, the courage you have displayed in the face of Chinese oppression, the film evidence you've displayed internationally, and the international tour that you're now conducting. Your point about the Olympic Games is well taken. This Parliament has voted twice on proposals made by my party. The first time to try and get the IOC to move the Olympic Games from China to another host country. Unfortunately, that motion was narrowly defeated, and only this week we have voted on a motion not to send any government official to the Olympic Games, to send a clear message to China that the internal repression is not to be tolerated. Unfortunately, that motion was also narrowly defeated. It is my hope that some of the parties that voted against this may use this meeting as an inspiration to change their voting behavior. On Tibet, obviously there is a great concern within my party on the situation, the worsening situation in Tibet. And perhaps echoing the question of my colleague, we are wondering what concrete actions the Netherlands, the European Union can still take to at least improve the living conditions of the people in Tibet for the upcoming years. Thank you.
아니 주는 게 지 보통 거나 아니 지 농농다 된데 뭐저 선수 안에 들어 드시시에 다 보는다 다 단단히나 보는 게 니츠 뭐 지슬로 레트고요 말이 다 보통 운이 동강난 진기 다 수위치 중다 가리나 거기다 뭐 지라다 년차 할리와 되고요 다 다나 제치 그나 보스네 롱마 추하게 다 된데게 두께지 치워리 다 운이시나 보기 니탄데 제치 그네 롱구야 지 치고요 지금 가도이 나가서 지 보기 중정대조나 로미 찔라 팬통경기다 근데 찔라단 자랑랑쟁 인증 직원이 지치고요. 다 보는 가서 댓글게 두세
I would like to state here again that the situation, one of the most difficult situations the Tibetans are facing is that their difficulties are not known in the world. So the information, the flow of information is something which is extremely important to us.
다 단단 가족이 보는 가요 레오기 지 루파지 구에데 가르치고 있는 보는 게단 로미기 도통데 게글라 롱롱 슈치스 지구야. 다 나진기다 보당 지역이다 지 그체대주 지문열던 지금 해야 되게 글라 롱롱 지구야. 디다 하정에 난거 친구치리다 제 자나 중에 단단했다 보나라 야지 땅 요소 고래 슈지 체적지고요 다나진 죽전다 대소 몽부지라 카이르니 다 자민들의 몽부지 보나라 보리용 거니 보게 주의를 좀다 가르치는데 년차 침보단다나 보대다 년가 침보다 머르지 자면 로야기다 년가 된대지가 올라서요.
Therefore, it is important to continue to talk about the human rights situation in Tibet. I think this is crucial for the situation, for the Tibetan situation, for the Tibetans in Tibet. The second thing is that the government here and the parliament could take action so that the Tibetan issue is solved in a peaceful manner, to encourage the Chinese government to talk to the Tibetan side. This is something that should be done with a lot of energy.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for that answer. The thing is, I think these are useful suggestions, of course. And I think rest assured, indeed, that China and both the things that China does externally and internally are being discussed in this parliament very, very often. What I'm wondering is, and perhaps you know, is what drives the Chinese government to behave as they do in the case of Tibet? Because obviously we can think of measures to stop them from that behavior, and I think that's important. But perhaps we can be more effective if we fully understand what is the reasoning behind the dangerous and aggressive Chinese stand with regard to Tibet. Thank you.
딱 군농티 딱주 사우치 치고요. 보기 사자디 다 자친부리 다 나중에 다 들까나서 뭐보여사. 근데 진짜 봐. 다 자는 거다 메모부 지 안에 다 나중에 다 맞아 보시는 이가 체요디 삼바. 네 크로즈 런징에 머리대 있단지 자매나 만들고 있나 단단 가지고다 지 갈수고 일단 가서 지 제치근나 다 나중에 보통 때다 내마이나 슈치스 롱롱지야 다 나중에 자노 크로즈에나다 지 보티 자능의 자신이 있다 루몽보다 자강 장정게 가서 때또 내용이는 지고요 말이다 가지 가그는 완전 지와 이나한테 무트도 단답을 두세 돈인지다 런미서 나와서 관리데 좀바지 주요리 다 나중에 다 지금 갈수고리 크론즈게 다 보티 자나 크론즈게 지케나 다 크론즈 지 키바딘데 자 침보츠고래 마음바 지금 원천다고 지고 와이나 다 두천 sonjala 소바 사 보기 사자티줄라 크론즈 주야게 체트 아마치다 딘데 다 난탕다 딘데 몽보지 아니 딘데기다 제즈다 몽보지 탄탄탄제 봐 요지
Now, speaking about the motivation and the reason why the Chinese enforce such policies in Tibet, I would like to mention first the territory of Tibet, which is huge and important to China. The second thing is the exploitation of minerals and extract them. This is also, again, a very, very important part of their motivation. And thirdly, China has a view on its own history and in the region about their role. So the repetition of Tibet being a part of China, though it's not true, serves to these ends. And let me add finally also the point that in the military sense aspect, Tibet is also important. We see that there are lots of different military sort of activities are going on, up to, you see, the use of nuclear weapons and so on, the installation of nuclear weapons. So these are the main reasons I would like to mention here. Yeah. may I add one point from,
Yes.
from the view of our organization, International Campaign? I think it's also important to see that China has changed its policy on Tibet and for the neighboring countries in the past 10 years. And there is now a new narrative in China which says China must become a homogenic society. And the reason why it says this is quite clear. There is the vision of a Chinese state which is homogenic, which is basically a Han-speaking, Mandarin-speaking society. And there are so many policies going on that undermines the original idea of having a China with different nationalities and so on. If you read the papers now in China, the policy papers, these mentionings, these notions are gone away. You hear a lot of one nation, one harmonious society, and these are all sort of euphemisms for destroying regional culture, expressions of different cultures, and so on. And this is something which takes place, of course, in China, but you see a lot of pressure also in the outside world, in Europe and everywhere, that we adopt this view of Chinese history, of this China's future. And I think this is a huge threat, not only for Tibetans, for us who are there, but for the world as such, and for the Europeans. Because there is a vision of authoritarian systems, you see, who are more efficient than liberal society and so on. And I think Tibet becomes therefore very important because Tibetans, we have a commitment to form a democratic, liberal society in the heart of Asia. And this region is extremely important. If you look at the West, there's Afghanistan, Tajikistan, all Turkestan. In the south, we have India. In the southeast, we have Burma, Thailand. So Tibet could play a very positive role for the region, but also for the world. For this reason, I think it's really important to challenge this view that the Chinese try to export in the world. Yeah.
Thank you for that additional information. I would also like to ask a question to Mr. Wangchen. It's about how people in daily life are suffering in Tibet. Could he mention the three most difficult things for the people in Tibet that should change to improve their daily life?
단 미 주막이 딱 강에 주디다 아 수기 센서티스로가 시마트와 시와이나 딜라다 총계를 쓰고요 봐. 다는 진기다 보너니 단단한 지 사자파츠란 니폴지야. 딜라 민 도바 요메라 마티바 잔당한 게 딜라냥 센서 시와이냥 전주지와. 다는 진기다 지 수기 다 로미 진바찬의 수수기 지 카퍼다 디조이나 메스실라 카자시고요. 디조 상마에다 시마디반로. 아 디조 상마에 크론조 카브란다 투지라서 봐. 카퍼도네 지 슬로라 빈자다다 가도 보디스나니라 체요리. 제가 다 망시티 나라라 khayori nyonshi ji 슬로라 레요리. 크론조나 파마 빈자데 로아치디 상마 디조라 로아치 마초 디조 가자 가르치고 다 딘제기 강에 직직고요. 다는 저기 수수 롬바랑니 마지 답나 누메기 메단 두토미티조 하살라양 루마초와 딘데기다 고 케이티사마다 수 케이티조이나 수 베초타야다 네 티조경나 딱자지기 토네 가제시와이나 지 자미케 랑기시고요 다 티조사마 미치기 강에 치시지 치고미죠.
Yes, let me mention these points to you. The most difficult thing is that people are not to express them freely, meaning that everything is controlled, also the telephone communication. People are not safe in their private communication, so that they fear, you see, talking openly, also to close friends and to relatives abroad or whatever. So this is something which is putting a lot of pressure on people in daily life. The second point I would like to mention is that people are displaced from one place to some other place, you see. And this is, again, something which has huge consequences for these people, for some nomad people who have to leave their pastures. Then free movement is also an issue. People from one region are not allowed to visit other regions inside Tibet. There are many, many restrictions for traveling inside Tibet. And finally, it's about our culture, language, which is suppressed, and on different level, we feel here that our culture, the Tibetan language, most prominently is suppressed. Yeah.
The topic of oppressing a language in a country, minorities' language, that is not just happening in Tibet or just in China. It happens in several other countries as well. Could he explain a bit more how that oppression functions in Tibet?
tapoki KTM sigi pecho tong machiwa di tajagane pecho tong chkoyo mari ta perna kendre chpala tizu noni ngazu ji ta digi kegi chena left sigorwa left gi thone ani khronzo chchi tini dolang ji di samba ani chchi poke pecho tong khronzo ti tan tagoyo ta nanjingi.
First of all, the control is thorough. So in social media, if you talk in Tibet live, it's suppressed. You are cut off, you say. Yeah.
We're back. No, yeah, we're moving. Okay.
딱게디 당부디 레프너니 배조 담아치가 치고래 뉴욕에 토니 지금 리콘수수기나 루와이나 이쯤 지자케시고 요같이 치고요. 데니 작강다 만강다 다 가리나고 지 자케 정기 거니 맞지 보케티 하는 배조매와 치고요. 딱 그거 산에 런중기 춘이월에 춘때나 보케 보이 시고서 보케 시고야 보이 배조 당고요. 그래서 이난 가게 시에마다 락들 자원이 지고요 말이요. 다 대주 강의 지시지 치고요. 다 단단이나 보기 전전 대주 정말 소단도 디삼바 자이 자케 강에 보이 매바 보이 그 손세 매바 주요. 다 대주 뭐렇게 다 강의 지시지 치고요. 이게.
Then let me mention two other areas. There are some official papers that say Tibetan language must be promoted, but the reality is if you go to a hospital, if you go to a post office or to some other government offices, Tibetan language is not allowed to use. Everything is in Chinese. That is, has a huge impact on the language and its use. Then in school, the Tibetan classes are cut to a minimum. So this again contributes to a development that Tibetan language is getting less and less important.
As a follow-up, what about religion and religion education for people who want to give that to their children?
Yeah. The Tibet draw the Halvita Nanga Chimbuchi chicken, Bay Tijichin Dradilla. The non cheating Azugita book Gizon Kingita Dinichi Chikoyori. Then Nani Newton Chuguni Zondi, the book Chonjon to Tama, Low, or Nga Trutan Chijanguna, Low, Nga Tugni Gumbala Chagoyori. The December that Tizu Tama, Gumbala Chama Chawa, Tizu Tama, 루 조제부터 자나 주정기다 크로즈게 저 자신랑로 도정디 제고요리 군바나나 루 조제 마나 군바나나 루마치와 뜻인데게 장과당네 자나 주정 소탄에 자고요.
I would like to thank you for this very important questions.
This bell means that there's going to be, I think, a vote
Okay.
in the General Assembly.
Okay.
But after the bell stops, we can continue. However, we must finish at 2 o'clock, so that's in about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, I have to leave now because I have another debate that I need to go to. But I would like to thank you very much. I wish you all the best.
Yeah. So I thank you for this question. It's hugely important. In Tibet, in 2019, there was a new policy introduced. Before, it was allowed for children to go to the monastic institution and to get some religious advice, and together with the parents, you see, to undertake some religious education. Now, this has changed, and Tibetans only from the age of 18 are allowed to have these religious experiences. And up to 18, they are put in a system which is called patriotic education and exclude information about Buddhism and Tibetan culture.
Tati ko lu chonjong de ko tawachiku mari mi gamba tezu la jonjon tezu ge ko sheshi ya tezu dakpo cha mi gamba tezu gini rugorwa jonjon tezu yang tu si suchong chi gumba ge diksu da nangtan chilu de da tangse burwa tezu chama chonjong de ge jang rugu ge rugu ya chi khoyo ri da jana jong ge tezu chama ani dan zame su go yo da nanjing ge jonjon da lu zhunga ge da jonjon tezu chama chilu ge shiguna nya shu chi ma chwa chongjala tezu lan ru ma chwa 다 대주 못도 딱서 다 로직네 되기는라 다 슈침부터 요리다 근데 계시 지와이나 니 크론줄라 니체 조야라 소파 호타니 피야라 소파 다 근데 춘체만 보지 댄서
Yes, and those who work for the government have extra pressure if their children, just imagine, they become nun or monk or to have this religious experiences, then the family suffers consequences. And this means that they are not allowed, you see, to come to the office or to continue with the work and so on. So there is pressure from all sides on Tibetan culture.
Kijk nog even, nog een vraag van jouw kant. Ja. Okay, we have to come to a conclusion of this meeting. I know that Mrs. Mendersma would like to say one sentence. If she wants to do so, she can do that now.
Ja, hartelijk bedankt. Ik wil graag de leden van de commissie bedanken voor deze mogelijkheid voor Dhondup Wangchen om jullie te ontmoeten en met jullie deze openlijke exchange te hebben. Ik denk dat het heel waardevol is geweest om met iemand te spreken die eigenlijk heel recent uit Tibet komt. Die kans hebben wij en de leden niet zo vaak. Dus nogmaals, ik kijk er naar uit om samen met Wangpo Tetong het contact met jullie te blijven houden over de situatie in Tibet. Hartelijk bedankt.
Ja, dank voor uw aanbod. En we zullen dat uiteraard allemaal voor onszelf bekijken. En we zullen zien of daar op voortgeborduurd kan worden. Dan wil ik graag meneer Wangchen bedanken voor zijn komst en zijn uiteenzettingen. En meneer Tetong voor zijn hulp bij de vertaling. Thank you. Dan sluit ik hiermee deze bijeenkomst.